Have you ever had one of those days where a simple comment just seems to stick with you all day long? Maybe a coworker made an offhand remark about your project, or a friend cancelled plans at the last minute, and suddenly you find yourself replaying the moment over and over in your mind. That tiny comment grows into something much bigger, feeding self-doubt, frustration, or even anger. It's a feeling so many of us know all too well, that sense of being personally slighted, even when logically we know it probably wasn't meant that way. It's exhausting, isn't it, letting outside words and actions dictate our inner peace? What if you didn't have to live that way? What if you could hear those comments, acknowledge them, and then let them go without carrying the weight of them for hours or days? This isn't about becoming emotionless or detached from the world. It's about building a stronger, calmer core within yourself, one that isn't easily shaken by what others say or do. That's where the ancient philosophy of Stoicism comes in. Far from being outdated or cold, Stoicism offers practical, real-world tools to help us navigate life's inevitable challenges with clarity and resilience. In this video, we're going to explore 25 powerful Stoic techniques designed to help you stop taking things personally and maintain your inner peace no matter what comes your way. These aren't abstract ideas, they're actionable strategies used for centuries by philosophers, leaders, and everyday people to cultivate emotional strength and perspective. Whether you're dealing with criticism, rejection, or just the daily friction of interacting with others, these methods will help you respond rather than react and reclaim control over your emotional well-being. So if you're ready to free yourself from the burden of taking things to heart, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Our first and perhaps most fundamental technique comes directly from the teachings of the Stoic philosopher Epictetus. He introduced a simple yet life-changing idea called the dichotomy of control. At its heart, this principle is about making a clear and conscious distinction between two categories in life: the things that are within our power and the things that are not. What is truly up to us, our own judgments, our intentions, our desires, our aversions, essentially, our internal world and how we choose to respond to events. Everything else, Epictetus would argue, is not within our control. This includes the actions of other people, the opinions they hold, our reputation, our wealth, our health, and even the past or the future. Think about that last part for a moment. The opinions other people hold about you, that is firmly in the category of things outside your control. You cannot reach into someone's mind and force them to think well of you. You can act with integrity, you can be kind, you can do excellent work, but their final judgment is theirs alone. When we take something personally, what we're often doing is confusing these two categories. We're pouring our emotional energy into trying to manage or change something that was never ours to command in the first place. We're fighting a battle we are guaranteed to lose because we don't have any authority on that battlefield. Let's make this practical. Imagine your boss looks over a report you spent weeks on and says, "This isn't quite what I was looking for." The initial sting is real. But now, apply the dichotomy of control. What is outside your control? Your boss's opinion of the report, their tone of voice, their expectations. What is inside your control? Your interpretation of their feedback, your decision to either get defensive or get curious, your next action to ask clarifying questions, to revise the work, or to learn from the experience for next time. The moment you make this shift, you reclaim your power. The comment stops being a personal indictment of your worth and becomes simply a piece of data about an external event, data that you can now choose to use or not. This isn't about suppressing your feelings, it's about redirecting your focus to the only arena where you can actually make a difference, your own choices and responses. By consistently practicing this sorting exercise, you build a mental reflex that protects your peace, because you stop wasting effort on the unchangeable and start investing it in the things you can truly influence. Following that powerful practice of focusing only on what you control, we arrive at a second technique that radically shifts your entire perception of the world and your place within it. This method comes from the personal writings of the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, who constantly reminded himself to adopt what he called the view from above. It's a mental exercise where you deliberately zoom out from your immediate ground-level problems and imagine observing your life and even the entire planet from a cosmic vantage point. Picture yourself rising above your town, then your country, seeing the Earth as a sphere hanging in the vast darkness of space. From this incredible distance, all of human existence can seem like a brief, flickering moment. The empires that rose and fell, the grandest achievements, the most painful personal tragedies, they all take their place as tiny parts of a much larger, unfolding story. When you feel a sharp sting from a perceived insult or a moment of social rejection, this exercise is profoundly grounding. That harsh comment from a colleague, that feeling of being left out, the nagging worry about what someone thinks of you, how do these things look from 10,000 miles up? They shrink from monumental catastrophes to what they often truly are, small, temporary events. This isn't meant to trivialize your feelings or suggest your experiences don't matter. Instead, it offers a profound sense of context. It's a tool to quiet the ego, that part of us that screams for recognition and is hypersensitive to any perceived slight. The ego wants to believe that every interaction is of earth-shattering importance, but the cosmic view gently reminds us that we are all small, beautiful parts of a magnificent whole. Let's make this real. You're at a family gathering and a relative makes a joking comment about your career choice. Your face flushes, your heart beats faster. It feels personal and humiliating. Now close your eyes for just a second and engage the view from above. See the room you're in from the ceiling, then see the entire city from the clouds. Keep going past the atmosphere until you can see the blue marble of Earth itself spinning silently in the void. On that planet, there are billions of people, each with their own complex lives, fears, and joys. In that context, that one comment is a single, fleeting sound wave that happened and then vanished. It holds only the power you choose to give it. This perspective doesn't make you cold or uncaring, it makes you free. It allows you to acknowledge the comment without letting it define your entire emotional state. You can choose to smile, let it go, and re-engage with the conversation, secure in the knowledge that your worth was never truly on trial. By regularly practicing this mental zoom out, you build a deep-seated resilience that comes from knowing your place in the universe is both insignificant and profoundly precious, freeing you from the prison of taking every little thing to heart. Now, if the dichotomy of control is about what we focus our energy on, and the view from above is about gaining perspective, then this third technique is about how we actually process the information that comes our way. The Stoics called this the discipline of perception, or practicing objective judgment. This is the mental skill of learning to separate the raw, neutral event itself from the layer of emotional judgment and personal story we instinctively add on top of it. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, choose not to be harmed, and you feel not harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. He's pointing directly to this gap between an event and our interpretation of it. Think of it like this: your mind is a courtroom. An event happens, let's say, a friend walks past you in the hallway without saying hello. The event itself is just a simple fact. A person moved through a space and did not speak. But immediately, your mind, acting as a prosecutor, jumps in with a case. It presents a story. She ignored me. She must be angry about what I said yesterday. She doesn't value our friendship anymore. That story feels like absolute truth, and it triggers a whole cascade of emotions: hurt, anxiety, maybe even anger. But practicing objective judgment means you learn to step back and be the judge, not the prosecutor. You look at the same event and you deliberately strip away the narrative to get back to the bare, neutral facts. The fact is, she walked by and did not speak. That's all you know for certain. Everything else is an assumption, a story you are telling yourself. Why is this so powerful for not taking things personally? Because it forces you to consider alternative and often more likely explanations that have nothing to do with you. Perhaps your friend was lost in thought about a pressing work deadline. Maybe she simply didn't see you. She could be worrying about a sick family member. Her action, which your mind instantly made about you, was almost certainly about her own internal world. The Stoic practice is to actively generate these alternative explanations. It's not about pretending to be naive. It's about training your brain to default to curiosity instead of condemnation. You are retraining your first response from "what does this say about me" to "I wonder what's really going on here." So how do you put this into practice? It's a three-step mental habit. First, when you feel that initial sting of taking something personally, pause. Just for a moment, stop the mental movie from playing. Second, describe the event to yourself in the most plain, clinical, and boring language possible. Instead of "my date was rude and cut the evening short," you say, "the person I had dinner with looked at their watch at 9:15 p.m. and stated they needed to leave." This language drains the emotional charge out of the event. Third, actively list 2 or 3 other possible reasons for their behavior that are not a reflection on you. This isn't about making excuses for others. It's about freeing yourself from a narrative that causes you pain. By consistently applying this filter of objectivity, you build a powerful buffer between the world's events and your inner peace. You start to see that most rudeness, most criticism, and most perceived slights are not bullets aimed at you. They are the echoes of other people's internal battles, and you have the choice to simply not stand in the line of fire. Building on the idea of filtering events through objective judgment, we arrive at a technique that takes that defensive strategy and turns it into a permanent, unshakable strength. This is Marcus Aurelius's powerful concept of the inner citadel. While he was leading the Roman Empire through wars, plagues, and constant political intrigue, his personal writings reveal that his greatest battle was internal, to protect his own mind from being overrun by the chaos and criticism of the outside world. He envisioned the soul as a fortress, an inner stronghold that he could retreat to, a place where the opinions, insults, and judgments of others could not follow. The walls of this citadel are not made of stone, but of your own reasoned choices and your unwavering understanding of your core values. Think of it this way. Every day, the world throws all sorts of things at you: praise, blame, success, failure, kindness, and rudeness. If your sense of self-worth and peace is built out there on the shifting sands of external validation, then you are at the mercy of every changing tide. A compliment lifts you up, a criticism shatters you. You are constantly looking to others to tell you who you are and how you should feel. The inner citadel flips this dynamic entirely. It's the practice of moving the source of your validation from outside yourself to within. You become the author of your own worth, and in doing so, you make yourself immune to the opinions, good or bad, of anyone else. Their praise doesn't inflate you because you already know your own efforts. Their criticism doesn't deflate you because you alone are the final judge of your character. So how do you actually start building this fortress? It begins with a simple but profound exercise of self-definition. Take some quiet time to consciously decide what your core principles are. What values are non-negotiable for you? Is it integrity, kindness, courage, diligence? Write them down. These are the foundation stones of your citadel. Once they are set, your measure of any event becomes not "how did this make me feel?" but "did I live according to my values?" If someone insults you and you responded with patience and grace, then the event is a success from the citadel's perspective, regardless of the other person's words. Their opinion about you is now irrelevant data, like weather outside your walls. It might be happening, but it doesn't change the temperature inside. Another practical exercise is to conduct regular mental drills, almost like a fire drill for your peace of mind. When you are in a calm state, consciously bring to mind a past criticism or a hypothetical insult. Then practice responding to it from within your citadel. Say to yourself, that is their perspective and they are entitled to it. It does not change my knowledge of my own intentions or the truth of my character. This isn't about building arrogance, it's about building sovereignty. You are declaring mental independence. The goal is to make this your default response, so that when a real insult comes, you don't have to think. You just retreat behind your walls almost instinctively. You acknowledge the words were spoken without allowing them entry. You can even examine them with curiosity, as if you found an interesting artifact outside your gate, but you don't have to bring it inside and let it clutter your home. This mental shift transforms you from a passive recipient of life's slings and arrows into the active guardian of your own peace, a sovereign self ruling a kingdom of one. Now let's turn to a concept that might initially seem counterintuitive, but is perhaps one of the most transformative tools for liberation: the practice of amor fati, a Latin phrase that translates to love of one's fate. While famously associated with the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, this idea is deeply rooted in Stoic thought. It's the radical acceptance of everything that life brings you, not with passive resignation, but with active, enthusiastic embrace. This includes the very events we typically take personally: the harsh criticism, the unexpected rejection, the perceived disrespect. Amor fati asks you to see these not as attacks to be defended against, but as necessary and even welcome ingredients in the recipe of your growth. Imagine your life as a master sculptor, and every challenging event, every piece of criticism, is a chisel strike. Each blow might feel jarring, even painful in the moment. You could spend your energy resisting the strike, yelling at the chisel for being too harsh, or complaining about the unfairness of it all. But amor fati is the realization that the sculptor is not your enemy. The sculptor is you, and the chisel strikes are what shape you into a stronger, more refined work of art. To love your fate is to trust the process, to understand that the friction you feel isn't destruction, it's creation. It's the understanding that a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor, and a life without opposition never forges a resilient character. So how do we apply this when someone's words feel like a direct hit? It starts with a deliberate reframing of the event itself. Instead of hearing, "That was a stupid idea," and internalizing it as "I am stupid," amor fati trains you to hear it as "This is a chance to clarify my thinking," or "This friction is highlighting an area where I can become more articulate." You learn to meet the moment with a quiet, internal yes, and you accept the reality of what was said, and you immediately look for the utility within it. What can this teach me about how I communicate? Does this reveal a blind spot I was unaware of? Is this person, however rudely, pointing toward a truth I need to hear? This doesn't mean you have to agree with unfair criticism or tolerate abuse. It means you refuse to be defeated by it. You mine it for its value and discard the rest. This practice transforms your relationship with the entire world. You begin to see that people who challenge you are unwitting teachers, offering you lessons in patience, clarity, and conviction that you couldn't have gotten anywhere else. The offhand comment that once ruined your day becomes a puzzle to be solved, a clue about human nature or about yourself. By loving your fate, all of it, you disarm the external world of its power to offend you. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance and start seeing yourself as an active participant in your own evolution, grateful for every tool, even the uncomfortable ones, that helps you build a life of purpose and strength. Moving from the profound acceptance of amor fati, we now explore a proactive Stoic exercise designed to build emotional immunity before any offense even occurs. This is the practice of premeditatio malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. Far from being a pessimistic exercise in dwelling on the negative, This is a powerful mental drill used by Stoics like Seneca to inoculate themselves against life's inevitable shocks. The core idea is to deliberately and calmly envision the worst-case scenarios, not so you can worry about them, but so you can rob them of their power to surprise and destabilize you. By mentally rehearsing potential criticisms, rejections, or insults, you effectively desensitize yourself to their emotional sting. When you've already walked through an event in your mind and seen yourself responding with composure, the real event loses its ability to catch you off guard. Think of it as emotional fire drills. We conduct fire drills not because we expect a building to burn down, but so that if the alarm ever sounds, we don't panic. We know exactly what to do. Our response becomes automatic, practiced, and calm. Premeditatio malorum applies this same principle to our social and emotional life. If you're about to present a new idea at work, instead of just hoping for praise, you take a few moments to seriously consider the potential negative reactions. You imagine a colleague calling your idea impractical. You picture your boss asking a tough, skeptical question. You visualize someone dismissing your work entirely. The crucial part of this exercise is that you don't just imagine these events happening. You vividly imagine your ideal Stoic response. You see yourself listening calmly, nodding, thanking them for the feedback, and maintaining your inner equilibrium. You watch yourself in this mental movie, not getting flustered, not becoming defensive, and not taking any of it personally. This practice works for a few key reasons. First, it exposes you to the feared event in a safe, controlled environment, your own mind. This repeated exposure diminishes the shock value and the accompanying anxiety. The unknown is always more frightening than the known. By making the potential insult familiar, you strip it of its novelty and its power. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it allows you to pre-decide your response. In the heat of the moment, when emotions are high, we often react instead of respond. We say things we regret or internalize things we shouldn't. But when you've already decided how you will act, you reclaim a sense of agency. You are no longer a passenger on an emotional roller coaster. You are the driver following a route you've already mapped out. Here is how you can put this into practice regularly. Set aside a few quiet minutes each morning or the night before a potentially challenging event. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Now, identify one thing you are hoping will go well: a difficult conversation, a social event, sharing something you've created. Then gently ask yourself, what is the worst reasonable outcome? Not a fantastical catastrophe, but a plausible negative reaction. See it unfold in your mind with as much detail as possible. Hear the words being spoken, notice the environment. Now, here is the most critical step. Watch yourself in this scenario responding not with anger or hurt, but with serene detachment and strength. See yourself pausing, acknowledging the comment without agreeing with it, and maintaining your composure. You might even mentally rehearse a simple, graceful response like, "I appreciate you sharing that perspective. I'll give it some thought." By doing this, you are building neural pathways. You are teaching your brain that this outcome is not only survivable but manageable. When, or if the negative event actually happens, your mind will have a sense of déjà vu. It will feel less like a crisis and more like a situation you've trained for. The comment might still land, but it won't stick. You'll have already experienced the emotional arc and come out the other side in your mental rehearsal, making the real thing feel like a minor echo rather than a deafening blow. This isn't about expecting the worst to happen. It's about being so well prepared for it that you can finally stop fearing it, freeing you to engage with the world with more courage and far less personal attachment to every outcome. This next technique asks us to shift our gaze from the fortress of the self outward, to see ourselves not as isolated individuals under constant social siege, but as deeply connected parts of a single, vast human community. The Stoics called this profound concept sympatheia, which translates to a feeling of interconnectedness, a shared belonging to something greater than ourselves. It's the understanding that we are all strands in the same web, and a tremor in one part of the web is felt in some way by all. When someone acts in a way that feels hurtful or dismissive, sympatheia doesn't encourage us to retreat further behind our walls. Instead, it invites us to lean into curiosity, to understand that their behavior is almost never a targeted missile, but rather a distress signal emanating from their own internal world. Think of it like this: we often interpret the actions of others through a highly personalized lens. A driver cuts you off in traffic, and the immediate story is, "How dare they disrespect me like that?" A store clerk is short with you, and it feels like a personal slight, but sympatheia asks us to widen that lens to a panoramic view. That impatient driver isn't acting against you. They are likely acting out of their own stress, anxiety, or preoccupation with a problem you know nothing about. The curt clerk might be exhausted from a double shift, worried about making rent, or grieving a personal loss. Their behavior is a symptom of their own internal state, a state that is filled with its own struggles, pains, and ignorance, just as ours can be. When we truly grasp this, the impulse to take things personally begins to dissolve, replaced by a more compassionate and accurate understanding. To practice sympatheia is to become a gentle detective of human nature rather than a harsh judge. The next time you feel the sting of a perceived insult, pause and actively remind yourself of this shared human condition. This person, like you, is doing what they believe is right based on their limited knowledge and their current emotional burdens. They, like you, are seeking happiness and avoiding pain, though they may be going about it in a clumsy or hurtful way. This perspective is not about making excuses for poor behavior or becoming a doormat. It is about freeing yourself from the unnecessary pain of assuming malicious intent where none likely exists. You can still set boundaries and address the action while releasing the personal hurt. You can think, "That was a rude way to speak, and it says more about their bad day than it does about my worth." Marcus Aurelius offered a simple but powerful exercise to cultivate this. He advised that when someone irritates you, to immediately bring to mind the qualities you share with them. They get tired, they desire happiness, they make mistakes, they love their families, they fear loss, they are human just like you. This mental act of finding common ground is an antidote to the poison of personalization. It bridges the gap between me and them, transforming a potential adversary into a fellow traveler who is also stumbling through life. By regularly practicing this lens of interconnectedness, you build a default setting of empathy. You begin to see the world not as a place full of people trying to offend you, but as a place full of people who are wounded, confused, and trying their best, often with the tools they have. This shift doesn't just protect your peace, it actively makes you a more understanding, kinder, and more connected person in a world that desperately needs it. This brings us to a cornerstone of Stoic practice, one that gives you the tools to actually implement everything we've discussed so far. It's called the discipline of assent, and it deals with that critical, lightning-fast gap between something happening and you deciding what it means. The Stoics identified that our pain rarely comes from the external event itself, but from our swift, unquestioning agreement with our initial, often flawed, interpretation of it. To assent means to give your approval, to nod yes to a thought and accept it as truth. This discipline is the practice of withholding that immediate nod, of inserting a moment of conscious space between the impression and your judgment. It's in that space that your freedom resides. Think of your mind as a courtroom, but now with a crucial new rule. Every initial impression must be held at the door and questioned before it is allowed to enter and influence the proceedings. When someone makes a comment that feels like an insult, your first impression might scream, "That was disrespectful, they meant to hurt me." The discipline of assent teaches you to stop that thought at the door. You don't immediately agree with it and let it in, setting off a chain reaction of anger and hurt. Instead, you treat it like a piece of evidence that needs to be examined. You hold it up and ask, "Is this absolutely true? Is this the only way to interpret what was said? Am I certain of their intention?" the Roman philosopher Seneca was a master of this. He advised that the best response to a sudden provocation is to delay your reaction. He famously said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." He wasn't telling you to simply bottle up your feelings. He was instructing you to create a buffer of time, even just a few seconds, to allow your rational mind to catch up with your emotional reflex. In that delayed moment, you reclaim your power to choose your response rather than being hijacked by a knee-jerk reaction. You move from being a passenger on an emotional roller coaster to being the engineer who can slow the train down and decide which track to take. Let's make this incredibly practical with a modern example. You're in a meeting and you suggest a new strategy. A colleague immediately responds with, "That would never work. It's completely unrealistic." The first impression that floods your system is one of humiliation and anger. It feels like a public dismissal of your competence. Without the discipline of assent, you might lash back defensively or shut down and seethe, taking it very personally. But with this practice, you create a pause. You take a breath, literally, a deep breath, and in that moment you interrogate the impression. You ask yourself, is it absolutely true that my idea would never work? Probably not. It's an exaggeration. Am I certain my colleague's intention was to personally belittle me? Perhaps they are overly cautious or had a bad experience with a similar idea in the past, or are even worried about the extra work it might create for them. By questioning the initial impression, you drain it of its absolute power. You might then choose to respond not from hurt pride, but from a place of curiosity. You could say, "You might be right, it could be a challenge. Help me understand your concerns about the feasibility." This response completely changes the dynamic. It de-escalates the situation, projects confidence, and opens a dialogue instead of a conflict. You didn't take it personally because you didn't assent to the idea that it was personal. You treated it as data, not a verdict. By making this tiny pause your habitual response, you build an incredible resilience to the words of others, understanding that you alone hold the gavel that decides what something truly means. This brings us to a profound shift in focus that strikes at the very heart of why we take things personally in the first place: our obsession with reputation. The ninth Stoic technique asks us to make a clear and conscious choice between chasing the shadow of what others think of us and building the substance of our own character. The philosopher Epictetus drew a brilliant and unflinching distinction between these two paths. He said that reputation is nothing more than the impression others have of you, and since the minds of others are utterly outside your control, your reputation is therefore also outside your control. It is, as he might say, an external, a thing to be regarded with indifference. Your character, on the other hand, is the one thing that is always, completely, and irrevocably within your power. It is the sum total of your choices, your virtues, your intentions, and your actions. To worry about reputation is to hand the keys to your self-worth over to a fickle and unpredictable world. To focus on character is to reclaim those keys and build a worth that is unassailable from the outside. Think about the sheer exhaustion of trying to manage your reputation. It's like trying to control the wind. You twist yourself into knots trying to present the right image. You agonize over a misinterpreted text message. You preemptively explain yourself for fear of being judged. You are constantly performing for an audience whose taste you can never fully know and whose attention is perpetually wandering. This performance is a prison of your own making, and the sentence is a life of anxiety. Every time you take something personally, you are essentially checking your reputation's stock price and feeling panicked because it seems to have taken a sudden dip based on someone else's actions. The Stoic asks a simple, liberating question: why are you investing in such a volatile and unreliable market in the first place? The market of other people's opinions will always crash at some point, no matter what you do. The alternative is to invest all that energy into the one venture you have complete control over, the business of your own character. This is a permanent, stable investment that yields compounding returns in inner peace. Imagine two gardeners. One is constantly running to the fence, worrying about what the neighbors think of their flowers, trying to arrange the blooms just so for external approval. The other gardener never even looks over the fence. They are wholly focused on the soil, on pulling weeds, on ensuring the plants are healthy and strong according to the principles of good gardening. Which garden will truly flourish? The Stoic is the second gardener. Their focus is on cultivating the virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline within their own soul. They know that if the garden of their character is well tended, it doesn't matter if a passerby disapproves of the color of the roses. The health of the plant is an objective fact, independent of anyone's opinion. So how do you make this shift from reputation to character in your daily life? It starts with a simple but powerful question you can ask yourself anytime you feel the pull of social approval or the sting of criticism. Am I acting in accordance with my values right now? If the answer is yes, then your work is done. You have succeeded regardless of the outcome or the reaction. If you spoke with honesty, acted with integrity, and treated others with kindness, then the transaction is complete and successful on your end. Whether the other person accepts your honesty, recognizes your integrity, or returns your kindness is their business, not yours. Their reaction is part of their own character-building journey. This doesn't mean you become oblivious to feedback. It means you evaluate feedback based on whether it helps you build a better character, not a better reputation. You can ask, is there truth in this that can make me wiser or more effective, while simultaneously dismissing the parts that are merely noise or malice. Ultimately, this practice frees you to act with incredible moral courage. You can do what is right, not what is popular. You can stand by your principles even when they are misunderstood, because your sense of validation comes from the unwavering knowledge that you acted rightly, not from the temporary and unreliable applause of the crowd. By letting go of the impossible task of controlling what others think, you gain the ultimate power, the ability to control who you know yourself to be. And that self-knowledge, that solid core of character, is the most powerful armor against ever taking anything personally again. Following the principle of focusing on what we can control, our own character, we now come to a technique that is perhaps the most immediate and practical tool you can use in the moment a provocation occurs. This is the profound and often underestimated art of silence. In a world that constantly pressures us to have an immediate opinion, a quick comeback, or a defensive retort, the Stoics recognize that true power often lies not in what you say, but in what you deliberately choose not to say. This is not the silence of weakness, fear, or submission. It is the strategic, powerful silence of self-possession. It is the conscious decision to create a buffer of time between the trigger and your response, a pause that allows the dust of emotion to settle so that the clarity of reason can emerge. The Roman statesman and Stoic philosopher Cato the Younger was a legendary exemplar of this practice. He faced constant and vicious political attacks from his rivals, who would mock his Stoic principles, his manner of dress, and his unwavering integrity. On one famous occasion, as recorded by the historian Plutarch, an opponent named Lentulus spent an entire speech in the Roman Senate hurling insults and abuse directly at Cato. The entire chamber watched, waiting for Cato's fiery rebuttal. But Cato simply sat there, composed and silent, working on some paperwork as if he hadn't heard a thing. His silence wasn't passive, it was a deafening statement of indifference. It communicated more powerfully than any words could have that the opinions of his critic were so insignificant, so unworthy of his energy, that they didn't even merit a response. By refusing to engage, he completely disarmed his attacker. The insult, having nothing to push against, simply fell flat, making the insulter look foolish and petty while Cato retained his immense dignity. This art is so powerful because it fundamentally changes the dynamic of the interaction. When someone throws a verbal jab at you, they are often priming for a fight. They expect a reaction: hurt, anger, a counterattack. This expected reaction is the fuel for their behavior. Your immediate emotional response is exactly what gives their words power over you. By choosing silence, you starve that expectation of its fuel. You reveal that you are playing by an entirely different set of rules, a set where your inner peace is not contingent on their approval or their attacks. You shift from being a participant in their drama to being a calm observer of it. This doesn't mean you never respond. It means you respond on your own terms, at a time of your choosing, from a place of calm rationality rather than heated emotion. So how can you cultivate this art in your daily life? The next time a comment lands with a sting, practice the pause. Before a single word leaves your lips, take a breath. Or 2 or 10. You might even need to physically remove yourself from the situation for a moment. In that space of silence, you are not just doing nothing. You are actively doing the most important thing. You are reclaiming your sovereignty. You are giving yourself the opportunity to run the event through the other Stoic filters we've discussed. You can ask yourself the questions from the discipline of assent. Is this true? Is this helpful? Does this require a response from me at all? Very often, you will find that the perceived need to immediately defend yourself was an illusion. Most insults are like stray arrows. They only hit their mark if you stand in front of them. By stepping aside through silence, you let them harmlessly fly past. This practice transforms potential conflicts into opportunities for immense personal strength. That email full of unfair criticism doesn't get a reactive reply fired back in minutes. It gets the gift of your silence for a few hours or even a day, allowing you to craft a response that is measured and effective, if one is needed at all. The backhanded compliment from a relative at a family gathering is met with a simple, silent smile and a change of subject, gracefully denying it the oxygen of engagement it sought. Each time you choose this purposeful pause, you reinforce the unshakable truth that your value is not up for debate in every social interaction. You are no longer a puppet whose strings can be pulled by anyone with a harsh word. You become the master of your own reactions, and in doing so, you demonstrate a quiet strength that is far more impressive and persuasive than any hastily spoken defense could ever be. Now we turn to a technique that might sound intense at first, but is actually one of the most effective ways to build profound gratitude for your present reality and complete immunity to life's petty annoyances. This is the practice of negative visualization, or as the Stoics called it, premeditatio malorum. While we touched on this earlier for specific events, here we apply it on a grander, more philosophical scale. The exercise is simple. You deliberately and vividly imagine the worst-case scenarios for your life, not to dwell in fear, but to appreciate the stark contrast with your current reality. By mentally walking through the possibility of total loss, social rejection, or profound misfortune, you accomplish two incredible things. You develop a deep, heartfelt gratitude for what you have right now, and you simultaneously shrink your daily irritations down to their true, insignificant size. Let's take the very thing that often causes us pain, social judgment. You feel hurt because a few people in your social circle seem to be excluding you or talking behind your back. It feels massive, all-consuming. Now engage in negative visualization. Close your eyes for a moment and truly imagine the absolute worst-case scenario. Don't just imagine a few people being dismissive. Imagine everyone. Picture yourself completely and utterly alone. Imagine every single person you know, your friends, your family, your colleagues, all turning their backs on you at once. Visualize the silence where there was once conversation, the empty calendar where there were once invitations, the profound isolation of having your entire social world vanish. Sit with that feeling for just a few seconds. Feel the weight of that true loneliness. Now open your eyes, look around you. Is that reality? No. The actual situation is that a handful of people may be acting coldly. Compared to the abyss of total rejection you just mentally visited, this minor criticism or social slight is revealed for what it truly is: a tiny, almost invisible speck on the vast canvas of your social life. The practice doesn't just make you feel better by comparison, it fundamentally recalibrates your emotional scale. The thing that felt like a 9 out of 10 on your pain scale moments ago now feels like a 1 because you've just given yourself a taste of what a real 10 would actually be like. This isn't about minimizing your feelings, it's about maximizing your perspective. The Stoics believed that we become fragile when we assume our circumstances are permanent and guaranteed. We take our relationships, our health, and our comfort for granted, and then we are shocked and personally wounded when the smallest thing disrupts that comfort. Negative visualization is the antidote to that fragility. It's a conscious reminder that everything we have is on loan from fate and it can be recalled at any moment. This realization is not meant to make you live in anxiety. It's designed to make you live in awe. That friend who forgot to call you back, instead of feeling slighted, you feel grateful that you have friends to call. That critical comment on a project, instead of feeling attacked, you feel grateful that you have the capacity to create and share work at all. By regularly contemplating the loss of what you cherish, you stop focusing on its minor imperfections and start marveling at its very existence. This practice builds a resilient joy that is completely independent of other people's opinions, because your happiness is no longer contingent on everything being perfect. It's rooted in the profound gratitude that things are as good as they are, right here, right now. After mastering the art of silence, we arrive at a technique that provides perhaps the ultimate perspective shift, one that has been a cornerstone of Stoic practice for millennia. This is memento mori, a Latin phrase that translates to remember you must die. At first glance, this might sound dark or morbid, a practice of dwelling on the end. But in the hands of the Stoics, it was anything but. For philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, this was not a call to live in fear, but a powerful tool to instill urgency, gratitude, and profound clarity about what truly matters. It is the practice of holding the finite nature of your own life consciously in mind, not to create anxiety, but to liberate yourself from it. When you truly internalize that your time here is limited and precious, the petty criticisms, the social slights, and the perceived disrespects of daily life lose their power to dominate your mental and emotional energy. They are revealed for what they often are, distractions from the real work of living a meaningful life. Think of it like adjusting a microscope. When you're focused on a minor insult, it's like you have the lens set to its highest magnification. That one comment fills your entire field of vision, appearing huge and all-important. Memento mori is the act of turning the dial way back, pulling the focus out to reveal the entire slide. Suddenly, that same comment is just a tiny, almost invisible speck on a much larger landscape. The practice reminds you that you have a finite number of days, a finite number of heartbeats. Is this particular moment, this particular person's opinion, truly worthy of consuming one of those irreplaceable heartbeats with anger or hurt? Is this the story you want to be replaying in your mind during your final hours? The answer, when viewed through this lens, is almost always a resounding no. This realization is incredibly freeing. It allows you to conserve your emotional energy for the things that genuinely deserve it: love, creation, learning, and connection. So how do we move this from a philosophical concept to a daily practice that prevents us from taking things personally? It doesn't require dwelling on death constantly. It's about integrating small, gentle reminders into your routine that anchor you in the present and highlight what's important. One powerful method is to make it a part of your morning ritual. As you sip your coffee or look out the window, take just 30 seconds to consciously acknowledge, this day is a gift. It is one of a finite number I will receive. How will I use it well? This simple framing sets your intention for the day. It primes your mind to prioritize your own values and actions over the unpredictable opinions of others. You are starting the day as the sovereign of your time, making it much harder for someone else's offhand remark to hijack your kingdom. Another practical exercise is to use moments of irritation as direct triggers for memento mori. The next time you feel that familiar heat of taking something personally, when a driver honks at you, a coworker dismisses your idea, or a stranger is rude, pause and ask yourself a simple question. In the context of a dying wish, does this matter? Imagine yourself at the end of your life looking back on this exact moment. Would you be proud of spending it feeling offended? Would you even remember it? This isn't meant to trivialize your current feelings, but to contextualize them. The answer will almost certainly be that this momentary friction is utterly insignificant in the grand narrative of your life. This mental time travel creates immediate space between the event and your reaction, allowing you to shrug it off and redirect your attention to something far more meaningful. The Stoics also used physical objects as reminders. Seneca wrote about this, suggesting we keep our mortality in mind to appreciate life's beauty. You might choose a piece of jewelry, like a ring with a skull motif, a classic memento mori symbol, not as a Gothic statement but as a personal touchstone. Every time you feel it or glance at it, it serves as a subtle nudge to remember what's real. It's not about death, it's about life. It's a prompt to ask, am I living right now? Or am I just reacting? This practice cultivates a state of mind where you are far less available for offense because you are too deeply engaged in the vibrant, fleeting experience of being alive. You begin to see that taking things personally is essentially a form of forgetting how short life is, forgetting your own power, and forgetting that the opinions of others are just whispers that will soon be lost to the wind, while how you chose to spend your precious time will echo through the character you built for a lifetime. Moving from the broad perspective of memento mori, we now turn inward to a more intimate and systematic practice for processing the events of the day. This is the profound Stoic discipline of nightly reflection, a practice of journaling that transforms your personal diary into a training ground for emotional resilience. While figures like Seneca advocated for this evening review, it was the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius who left us the most powerful blueprint for this work in his personal writings, which we now know as Meditations. It's crucial to understand that this was not a diary in the conventional sense. He wasn't just recording events. This was his private philosophical workshop, a place where he would take the raw, often painful material of his daily interactions and deliberately forge it into wisdom, peace, and strength. The goal of this practice is to re-examine your day's interactions without the heated charge of the moment, to calmly dissect your reactions, and to determine with cool reason whether taking something personally was a justified response or a misperception born from your own ego or assumptions. Imagine your mind at the end of a long day. It's filled with mental clutter, fragments of conversations, lingering feelings of irritation, pride, or embarrassment. Without this practice, those fragments simply bounce around, reinforcing neural pathways of reactivity. The evening review is the process of gently gathering those fragments, holding them up to the clear light of your rational mind, and deciding which are worth keeping and which should be discarded. You are essentially acting as your own therapist and coach, asking yourself the tough but fair questions that lead to growth. This is where you move from theoretically understanding Stoic principles to actually wiring them into your brain, turning philosophical concepts into automatic default responses. So, how do you actually do this? You can take direct inspiration from the prompts Marcus Aurelius used on himself. After the house was quiet, he would open his journal and begin a dialogue with his own soul. One of his most powerful recurring themes was to analyze the motivations of others. When someone had upset him that day, he wouldn't ruminate on the hurt. Instead, he would write out an answer to the question, what was their underlying intention? He might conclude that the person who snapped at him was acting out of ignorance or a desire to help in their own clumsy way or from a place of their own deep pain. This practice systematically replaces the default story of "they meant to hurt me" with a more probable and less personal explanation. Another prompt he used was to examine his own faults. If he felt offended by criticism, he would ask, "Is there truth in this? Is this a blind spot I need to see?" This turns an insult from an attack into a potential gift, a piece of data that can be used for self-improvement, but only if you have the humility to accept it. Let's make this incredibly practical for your own life. Your journal entry for a challenging interaction might look something like this. First, state the bare facts. During the team meeting, Sarah interrupted my presentation and said my data was outdated. Second, record your initial emotional reaction. I felt humiliated, angry, and assumed she was trying to undermine me in front of the boss. This is where you honestly acknowledge the sting. Third, and this is the crucial Stoic shift, apply reasoned analysis. Ask yourself Marcus Aurelius's questions. What were Sarah's possible intentions? Could she have been genuinely trying to ensure accuracy even if her method was poor? Was she perhaps nervous herself and overcompensating? Is it possible my data was slightly old and her comment, however delivered, held a kernel of truth that could make the final project better? Finally, extract the lesson. My taking it personally was a choice. I assented to the impression that it was an attack. Next time, I can choose to pause, thank her for the input, and suggest we review the data sources together after the meeting. The project's success is more important than my momentary embarrassment. By engaging in this ritual each night, you accomplish something remarkable. You are not just venting emotions onto a page, you are diffusing them. You are rewriting the narrative of your day from one of being a victim of external events to being an active student of them. The person who insulted you becomes your unwitting teacher, showing you where your ego is still tender and needs strengthening. Over time, this practice builds a powerful mental reflex. You start to do this analysis in real time, or at least much faster. The space between the event and your calm response widens naturally because you've done the reps in your journal. You begin to see your emotional reactions not as inevitable truths, but as hypotheses to be tested against the evidence of logic and character. This nightly habit is the quiet, consistent work that builds the unshakable inner citadel, stone by stone, ensuring that fewer and fewer of the world's arrows ever find their mark. This next technique invites you to step into the shoes of an idealized mentor, a mental model the Stoics called the sage. The sage represents the perfected Stoic, a figure of complete wisdom, unshakable virtue, and profound inner peace. While no human is truly perfect, modeling the sage is not about achieving an impossible ideal. It's a powerful exercise in perspective-taking. It's about asking yourself a simple but transformative question in the heat of a challenging moment. How would a person of perfect wisdom and compassion handle this situation? This shifts your focus away from your raw, reactive ego and toward a higher standard of response, allowing you to bypass your initial hurt feelings and access a more grounded, rational part of yourself. Think of it like having a wise, calm coach living in your mind, one you can consult anytime. When you feel the sting of a personal insult or a dismissive comment, you don't have to navigate that reaction alone. You can mentally call upon this internal advisor. How would they see this event? They would likely view the critic not as a malicious enemy, but as a confused person acting from their own limited knowledge and pain. They would see the criticism itself not as a verdict on their worth, but as neutral information that could potentially be useful or could simply be discarded. They would feel no need to defend their honor because their honor is an internal fact, not something that can be damaged by external words. By consciously adopting this persona, even for a few seconds, you create a crucial gap between the provocation and your reaction, a gap where you can choose a better path. To put this into practice, try a simple mental rehearsal exercise. At the end of your day, during your evening reflection, bring to mind one interaction where you felt yourself taking something personally. Now close your eyes and replay the scene, but this time imagine yourself as the Stoic sage. Watch this calm, wise version of you navigate the exact same event. See their relaxed posture and gentle smile. Hear the tone of their voice, steady, kind, and unshaken. What words do they use? They might respond to a harsh comment with, "Thank you for sharing your perspective," or "I can see you feel strongly about this." Notice how they don't engage in the battle, don't try to win the argument, and don't internalize the negativity. They simply observe, process, and respond from a place of unassailable inner strength. The more vividly you can imagine this, the more you are building a new neural pathway, teaching your brain that this is a possible way to respond. You can also practice this proactively. Before walking into a potentially difficult conversation, a performance review, a stressful family dinner, a high-stakes meeting, take 2 minutes to mentally prep. Sit quietly and consciously embody the sage. Set an intention for how this ideal version of you would act, with patience, with active listening, with a focus on understanding rather than being understood. Decide that your goal for the interaction is not to be proven right or to avoid criticism, but to act virtuously regardless of what comes your way. By setting this intention beforehand, you are essentially programming your subconscious. When the challenging moment arrives, you are far more likely to default to that calmer, wiser persona because you've already mentally rehearsed the role. This practice turns everyday social friction from a threat into an opportunity to practice wisdom, gradually transforming your automatic reactions and making you virtually immune to taking things personally. Building on that foundation of emotional sovereignty, we now arrive at a Stoic practice that levels the entire social playing field, liberating you from the exhausting rollercoaster of seeking approval and dodging criticism. This is the profound discipline of practicing indifference to both praise and blame. The Stoics observed that these two, flattery and insult, are actually two sides of the very same coin, and that coin is the currency of external validation. If you are elated by praise, you will inevitably be crushed by its absence or by criticism. Your emotional state is then tethered to the unpredictable and often fickle opinions of others, making you a prisoner to their whims. The solution is not to become numb or unfeeling, but to develop a calm, steady equanimity, valuing only one form of currency, your own reasoned judgment about whether you acted with virtue. Imagine your sense of self-worth as a building. If you build it with the bricks of other people's praise, every compliment adds a brick and every criticism knocks one out. The structure is constantly under construction and demolition, never stable, always vulnerable to the next passing comment. The Stoic, however, builds their self-worth on the unshakable foundation of their own character. They use their internal compass of virtue as both the architect and the building inspector. The opinions of others become like weather outside the building, sometimes sunny and warm with praise, sometimes stormy and cold with blame. But the weather does not change the solidity of the foundation or the integrity of the structure inside. You can notice the weather without letting it dictate the stability of your home. So how do we cultivate this seemingly superhuman level of detachment? It begins with a simple but powerful reframe. See both praise and blame not as truths about you, but as data about the person offering them. A compliment often tells you more about the giver's desires, their mood, or their current needs than it does about your inherent worth. Similarly, an insult is almost always a reflection of the insulter's inner world, their frustrations, their insecurities, their own wounds. When someone praises your work, you can receive it graciously without letting it inflate your ego. You can think, "That's kind of them to say. It seems my work aligned with what they value today." When someone criticizes you, you can receive it calmly without letting it devastate you. You can think, "That's an interesting perspective. It seems my actions conflicted with what they value or expect." In both cases, you are the same person. The external noise changes, but your internal scorecard remains the only one that matters. A practical exercise to strengthen this muscle is to consciously seek out minor, controlled doses of disapproval. This isn't about becoming a masochist, it's about building tolerance. You could express a mildly unpopular but harmless opinion in a social setting. and simply sit with the feeling of not being universally approved of. You could share a piece of creative work you know is imperfect and make a conscious choice not to lead with apologies or caveats, allowing it to be judged on its own terms. The goal is to become comfortable with the sensation of not being praised, to realize that it is not a catastrophic event but a normal part of human interaction. This desensitizes you to the fear of blame, which is often what makes us crave praise in the first place. Another technique is to conduct a nightly review, specifically focusing on praise and blame you received that day. For each instance, ask yourself 2 questions. First, did I act in accordance with my virtues in that situation? If the answer is yes, then the praise is a pleasant but unnecessary extra, and the blame is simply irrelevant data. If the answer is no, then the blame might contain a useful lesson, and the praise was likely misplaced. The second question is, what might this person's comment reveal about their own character or current state? This shifts your focus from internalizing the comment to understanding human nature. By making this a daily practice, you systematically rewire your brain to default to this analytical mode, slowly breaking the addictive cycle of seeking external validation. You begin to walk through the world with a quiet, unshakable confidence that comes not from being universally liked, but from knowing with certainty that you are living by your own code. Think of a child's toy that has been dropped or broken. The gears are jammed, a wire is crossed, and instead of playing its happy melody, it just emits a loud, grating, repetitive noise. It's not making that sound because of anything you did. It's making that sound because it is, quite simply, broken. Its internal mechanism is malfunctioning. The great Stoic teacher Epictetus argued that this is precisely how we should view people when they are angry, cruel, or upset. Their harsh words and actions are not an accurate reflection of your value or your actions. They are the external noise emanating from an internal malfunction. Their gears are jammed by their own ignorance, their own pain, their own unmet expectations or unresolved fears. The noise is a symptom of their brokenness, not a verdict on your worth. This analogy is so powerful because it completely redefines the source of the problem. When someone unleashes a personal attack on you, the natural, ego-driven response is to internalize it, to hear you are bad instead of they are in pain. We immediately start checking our own internal machinery, wondering what we did wrong, how we malfunctioned to deserve this. The broken toy analogy stops this process cold. It redirects your diagnostic focus from your own soul to the state of theirs. It allows you to see that the unpleasant noise is coming from their internal speaker, not yours. Your only mistake was being within earshot when their breakdown occurred. Let's apply this to a real-world scenario. Your partner comes home from a terrible day at work, overwhelmed and frustrated. You ask a simple, innocent question about dinner plans, and they snap at you with unexpected sharpness. Why do I always have to decide everything? Can't you just figure it out for once? Without the Stoic lens, that comment feels like a direct and personal critique of your competence and your contribution to the relationship. It stings. You might retaliate, get defensive, or retreat into a silent sulk, taking it very personally. Now apply the broken toy analogy. The moment those words are spoken, you pause, and instead of hearing a truth about yourself, you hear the grating noise of a malfunction. You see not a cruel partner, but a person whose internal gears are jammed by the stress of their day, by a feeling of being overburdened at work, by a lack of control. The snap isn't about you or the dinner plans. It's the only sound their current broken state can produce. It's a cry of pain disguised as criticism. This reframe doesn't mean you become a doormat or excuse abusive behavior. You can still address the noise, but you do so from a place of empowered detachment, much like a parent dealing with a toddler's tantrum. You might respond with calm curiosity instead of matched anger. It sounds like you've had a really tough day. That wasn't really about the pasta, was it? This response does something miraculous. It refuses to engage with the content of the broken noise and instead addresses the brokenness itself. It often completely disarms the other person because you have seen through their anger to the pain beneath it. Even if they cannot admit it in the moment, you have protected your own peace by refusing to accept their malfunction as your problem to own. You have chosen not to be hurt by a broken toy, and in doing so, you often become the very person who can help them start to repair it. This next technique offers a remarkably simple yet powerful mental tool you can use in real time to short-circuit the cycle of taking things personally. It's called cognitive distancing, and it involves learning to mentally step back from your own thoughts and feelings to observe them rather than be them. Think of your mind as a stage. Usually, you are the actor, completely absorbed in the drama of every thought and emotion that appears. Cognitive distancing teaches you to take a seat in the audience instead, to watch the play unfold without getting swept up in the performance. The simplest way to do this is by subtly changing the language you use in your internal monologue. When a triggering thought arises, like "my boss thinks I'm incompetent," you are immediately fused with that thought. It feels like an absolute truth, and your body reacts as if it's a real threat. Cognitive distancing creates a crucial crack in that fusion. Instead of thinking, "my boss thinks I'm incompetent," you add a simple prefix. "I am having the thought that my boss thinks I'm incompetent." This tiny linguistic shift makes all the difference. It acknowledges the thought's existence without mistaking it for reality. You are no longer the thought itself. You are the thinker observing the thought. This creates a buffer of psychological space, a moment of freedom where you can choose whether to engage with that thought or simply let it pass by like a cloud in the sky. This practice is incredibly effective because it directly targets the mechanism of cognitive fusion, the process where we become so entangled with our thoughts that we can't see them as separate from our identity. By labeling the thought as just a thought, you engage the more rational, observational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, and quiet the reactive, emotional amygdala. It's like putting a pin in a grenade before it can explode. You're not suppressing the emotion, you're simply preventing it from hijacking your entire system. You can notice the feeling of hurt or anger without being compelled to act on it impulsively. To put this into practice, start by identifying your most common personalizing thoughts. These are often mind-reading thoughts where you assume you know what someone else is thinking about you. The next time you feel that familiar surge of emotion, pause and literally say to yourself, either out loud or in your mind, "I notice I'm having the thought that." And then complete the sentence, "I notice I'm having the thought that my friend is intentionally ignoring my texts. I notice I'm having the thought that my presentation was a total failure." This isn't about arguing with the thought or trying to make it go away. It's about changing your relationship to it. You are creating a witness consciousness that can observe the mental weather without being the storm. With consistent practice, this small shift in perspective becomes a powerful reflex, granting you the invaluable gift of space between a triggering event and your response, allowing you to respond with intention rather than react from a place of perceived personal attack. Now, let's explore a technique that might seem counterintuitive at first, but is one of the most effective ways to build a deep, embodied resilience to taking things personally. This is the practice of voluntary discomfort, a training method the Stoics used to systematically strengthen their minds by deliberately embracing small, manageable hardships. The core idea is simple yet profound. By willingly stepping into minor discomforts on your own terms, you build a tolerance and resilience that makes the unexpected discomforts of social friction and criticism feel far less threatening over time. It's like building a callus on your skin. The occasional rough surface no longer causes a painful blister because you've gently and consistently toughened the area through exposure. The Stoics weren't advocating for masochism or seeking out pain for its own sake. This is a strategic form of training, a mental and emotional workout. Just as you would lift weights to make daily tasks feel easier, You seek out small discomforts to make life's inevitable emotional weights feel lighter. When someone's criticism or a social slight lands, it creates a form of emotional discomfort. If your only experience with discomfort is having it forced upon you, it will always feel like an attack, a violation of your peace that you must defend against. But if you are already familiar with discomfort, if you have voluntarily invited it in and sat with it many times, then an external comment feels less like a devastating blow and more like a familiar sensation that you know how to handle. You've already proven to yourself that you can endure much more than a harsh word, so the word itself loses its power to shake you. So what does this look like in practice? It's about finding small, daily opportunities to step slightly outside your comfort zone. It could be something physical, like taking a cold shower for the final minute of your morning routine. That initial shock of cold water is a tiny, self-imposed hardship. Your instinct is to recoil, to escape the discomfort immediately. But when you choose to stay, to breathe through it, and to accept the sensation, you are not just building physical resilience, you are sending a powerful message to your subconscious mind: I can handle discomfort. I am in charge of my reaction to it. This lesson then translates directly to social situations. When you feel the emotional, cold shower of a critical comment, your trained mind is more likely to respond with the same calm acceptance rather than a panic to escape the feeling. The practice extends powerfully into the social realm as well. You can voluntarily engage in conversations that feel slightly awkward. This might mean asking a sincere question in a large meeting when you feel a bit nervous, or striking up a conversation with a stranger in a waiting room. You are voluntarily risking the minor discomfort of potential awkwardness or even mild rejection. Each time you do this and survive, which you always do, you are proving to yourself that social friction is not a catastrophe. It is manageable. You are building an emotional callus against the fear of what others might think. When you have willingly faced the possibility of social discomfort, someone's actual dismissive comment feels less like a unique and terrible event and more like just another variation of a feeling you already know how to navigate. Start by incorporating one small voluntary discomfort into your week. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Choose to walk somewhere instead of driving on a drizzly day. Skip that second cup of coffee. Have a conversation without talking about yourself. Each time you do this, you are depositing resilience into your emotional bank account. You are making a withdrawal from your reserve of courage and adding to your balance of inner strength. Over time, this accumulated strength creates a profound sense of self-confidence that is entirely independent of external conditions. You know from direct experience that you can handle physical cold, minor hunger, social awkwardness, and temporary inconvenience. Therefore, you also know in your bones that you can certainly handle someone's opinion. Their words become just another form of whether you have learned to walk through, equipped with the sturdy coat of resilience you have woven for yourself through your own voluntary practice. Now, let's explore a powerful shift in perspective that can instantly dissolve the sting of a personal attack by turning our gaze outward with genuine curiosity. This is the practice of actively imagining the world from the other person's point of view. When someone criticizes or offends us, our natural instinct is to retreat inward, to obsess over our own wounded feelings, and to see the comment as a targeted missile launched with malicious intent. This technique asks us to do the exact opposite, to step out of our own story and mentally walk a mile in the other person's shoes, not to excuse their behavior, but to understand its true source, which almost always lies within their own internal struggles rather than anything you specifically did. Think of it as being an emotional detective rather than a wounded victim. The moment you feel that familiar heat of taking something personally, you pause the internal monologue of hurt and ask a simple but transformative set of questions. What might this person be going through that I can't see? What kind of day, week, or year have they had? What private battles, fears, or insecurities might be fueling this outburst? You are not trying to justify rudeness or become a doormat. You are engaging in an act of profound psychological reframing that liberates you from the pain of assuming the comment was ever about you in the first place. Consider a real-world scenario. You're in a grocery store line and the cashier is uncharacteristically short and dismissive, snapping at you for not moving your cart forward quickly enough. The immediate, ego-driven story is, "This person is being rude to me. They have a problem with me. This story feels true and it hurts." Now apply the view from the other side. Instead of personalizing it, you get curious. You might imagine that this cashier has been on her feet for an 8-hour shift dealing with impatient customers. Perhaps she just received a worrying text about a sick child at home. Maybe she's anxious about an unpaid bill or is simply exhausted from a second job. Her snapping tone isn't a verdict on your cart-moving skills. It's the overflow of her own internal pressure cooker. The behavior is much more about her reality than it is about you. This practice is deeply rooted in Stoic thought. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself in his private writings to consider the motivations of those who irritated him. He would assume that people act out of ignorance of what is truly good rather than malice, and that when they err, it is because they are mistaken about the path to happiness. This perspective fosters compassion, which is the ultimate antidote to defensiveness. Compassion doesn't mean you accept poor treatment. It means you understand its origin, which allows you to respond with calm clarity rather than reactive anger. You might still need to address the behavior, but you do so from a place of strength and understanding, not from a place of personal hurt. To cultivate this habit, make it a mental exercise. The next time a driver honks aggressively at you, rather than feeling targeted, try inventing a compassionate backstory for them. Perhaps they are a nervous parent racing to pick up a sick child from school. When a colleague dismisses your idea in a meeting, instead of assuming they think you're foolish, consider that they might feel threatened by change or are under immense pressure from their own manager to cut costs. You are not required to be right about these imagined scenarios. The act of generating them is the practice itself. It forces your brain out of its self-centered default mode and into a more expansive, empathetic state. This doesn't just protect your peace, it actively makes you a more understanding and less reactive person in a world that desperately needs more grace. And this brings us to a technique that serves as the ultimate anchor for all the others, a practice that roots you firmly in the only reality that ever truly exists, the present moment. The Stoics understood that nearly all our suffering, especially the pain of taking things personally, arises not from what is happening right now, but from our relentless mental time travel. We ruminate on an insult that was hurled at us yesterday, replaying the scene until it feels fresh and raw all over again. Or we project ourselves into an imagined future, anxiously rehearsing a difficult conversation and feeling the sting of criticism that hasn't even happened yet. In both cases, we are being hurt by phantoms, by mental projections that have no substance in the current moment. The practice of focusing on the present is about cutting the cord to these psychological hauntings and returning to the solid ground of what is actually occurring right here, right now. Think of your mind as a movie projector. When you ruminate on the past or worry about the future, you are projecting images onto a blank screen and then reacting to them as if they were real. The past insult is a recorded film reel you keep choosing to play. The future criticism is a script you haven't even filmed yet, but you're already directing the horror movie version of it in your head. The present moment, by contrast, is the projector itself, solid, real, and often much quieter and more manageable than the dramatic stories we project. The goal of this Stoic practice is to turn off the projector, to sit in the quiet darkness of the now, and to realize that in this precise moment you are actually okay. The body that feels the anxiety of a future event is in the present, simply sitting in a chair, breathing. The heart that aches from a past comment is, right now, steadily beating in your chest. Most of the threats we perceive are not present-moment realities. They are mental fictions we have authored and then mistaken for truth. So how do we cultivate this anchor to the present? The Stoics were pioneers of what we might now call mindfulness, though they framed it as a discipline of attention. One powerful method is to use your physical senses as a tether to the now. The next time you find yourself spiraling because of something someone said, perform a simple but effective grounding exercise. Pause and consciously note 5 things you can see in your immediate environment. It doesn't matter what they are: the grain of the wood on your desk, the subtle pattern of light on the wall, a book on the shelf. Then, note 4 things you can feel: the texture of your shirt against your skin, the solidity of the floor beneath your feet, the warmth of your own hands. Move to 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This sensory inventory does something remarkable. It forcibly pulls your awareness out of the abstract, conceptual world of your thoughts and into the immediate, tangible reality of your physical existence. In this space, the insult from yesterday has no sensory reality. The feared conversation tomorrow cannot be touched, heard, or seen. You are here, and you are fundamentally intact. Another Stoic-inspired practice is to engage in a single task with your full and undivided attention. If you are washing a cup, just wash the cup. Feel the temperature of the water, notice the slip of the soap, observe the way the light reflects off the bubbles. When your mind tries to drag you back to that awkward email exchange, gently guide it back to the cup. This isn't about avoiding your problems, it's about reclaiming your mental sovereignty. You are training your mind to reside where your body actually is, breaking the habit of letting it wander into psychological time zones where it can only find pain. Each time you successfully bring your focus back to a simple, present-moment activity, you are strengthening your ability to do the same when a social trigger occurs. You are building the mental muscle to notice the initial sting of a comment, acknowledge it, and then choose to return your attention to the task at hand rather than following the thought down a rabbit hole of narrative and hurt. This practice builds a life where you are no longer held hostage by the ghosts of yesterday or the anxieties of tomorrow, but are fully alive and empowered in the only moment you can ever truly influence, this one. And this brings us to a practice that masterfully reframes the very source of our pain into a wellspring of strength, the deliberate cultivation of gratitude. Not just a general sense of thankfulness for the good things, but a targeted, Stoic-inspired gratitude for the challenges themselves, including the criticism and personal slights we instinctively recoil from. This technique asks you to perform a profound alchemy on your experiences, transforming the lead of perceived insult into the gold of personal growth. It's about shifting your entire identity from that of a victim, buffeted by the actions of others, to that of a student, actively mining every interaction for its hidden lessons. The Stoics believed that obstacles are not roadblocks on the path, they are the path. Each person who criticizes us, each interaction that feels like a personal attack, is an unwitting teacher offering a lesson we desperately need to learn, even if we didn't know we needed it. When someone points out a flaw in your work, however poorly delivered, they have handed you a map to a part of yourself that could be improved. When you feel the sting of exclusion, it highlights a potential over-reliance on external validation, showing you exactly where you need to build a more self-sufficient sense of worth. Gratitude is the lens that allows you to see this hidden curriculum. It's the decision to be thankful for the lesson, even if you didn't like the teacher's style. To make this a tangible practice, not just a nice idea, we turn to a powerful journaling exercise. This isn't about writing down things you're vaguely thankful for. It's a structured, probing inquiry designed to find the specific value in a difficult interaction. Let's walk through it. After a moment where you felt yourself taking something personally, open a journal and write down 3 headings. First, under the event, describe what happened in the most objective terms possible. Not, Sarah was rude and shot down my idea, but But in the meeting, Sarah stated that my proposal was not supported by the current data and would require too many resources. Second, under the initial sting, honestly name the hurt. I felt humiliated, angry, and devalued. My story was that she doesn't respect my contributions and was trying to undermine me. Third, and this is the crucial shift under the gift, you go mining for gratitude. Ask yourself these specific questions. What might this interaction be trying to teach me? Did it reveal a blind spot in my preparation? Did it show me where my communication could be clearer? Did it test my ability to remain calm under pressure? Is it forcing me to re-examine an idea and potentially make it stronger? Perhaps the gift is simply the practice itself, the opportunity to exercise your Stoic muscles and choose not to be offended. You might write, the gift is that Sarah's pushback, though sharp, forced me to recheck my data, and I found a more recent study that actually strengthens my argument. It also gave me a chance to practice responding with curiosity instead of defensiveness. I am grateful for the chance to improve the proposal and for the reminder that my worth is not tied to one idea's acceptance. By consistently performing this exercise, you rewire your brain's default response. You begin to approach social friction not with dread but with a sense of curiosity. I wonder what this person is here to teach me today. This doesn't mean you become a pushover or condone disrespect. It means you become so focused on your own growth that you stop concerning yourself with the packaging of the lesson. You learn to extract the nutrient from the husk and discard the rest. This practice builds an incredible kind of emotional agility, where you can acknowledge the unpleasant feeling without getting stuck in it because you are too busy looking for the value it contains. You move through the world with a deep, unshakable confidence that everything that comes your way, especially the difficult things, is ultimately there for your benefit, helping you forge a character that is resilient, wise, and truly hard to offend. Imagine the profound sense of freedom that would come from knowing your value so completely that no compliment could inflate your ego and no criticism could ever shake your foundation. This isn't a distant fantasy, it is the very essence of the Stoic practice of setting internal standards. While many of the techniques we've discussed help you manage your reactions to the outside world, this one goes straight to the source, redefining the very metric by which you measure your own worth. The Stoics argued that the root of taking things personally is our misguided habit of looking outward for validation, seeking approval from a world that is fickle, inconsistent, and utterly beyond our control. The solution is to perform a radical relocation of your self-worth, moving it from the shifting sands of external opinion to the unshakable bedrock of your own internal character. This concept is powerfully illustrated by the slave-turned-philosopher Epictetus. He drew a brilliant and liberating distinction between what he called externals and our own voluntary choices. Externals include everything from our reputation and social standing to our wealth and even our physical bodies, things that are ultimately not within our full command. Our voluntary choices, however, are the one thing that is always completely ours, our judgments, our intentions, our efforts to act with virtue. He taught that a person who ties their happiness and self-esteem to externals is like a sailor who has tied their boat to a rotten post. The first storm will tear it loose and send them adrift. But the person who anchors their worth to their own character, to their commitment to virtues like integrity, courage, and kindness, has secured their ship to something that cannot be moved by any outside force. So what does it look like to actually live by this internal standard? It begins with a conscious act of self-definition. You must sit down with yourself and decide with clarity and conviction what your core values are. What principles are non-negotiable for you? Is it honesty, even when it's inconvenient? Is it courage to speak up for what's right? Is it compassion, especially toward those who are difficult to love? These are not abstract ideas, they are the concrete criteria for your personal scorecard. From that moment forward, your measure of a successful day, a successful interaction, a successful life is no longer, did everyone like me, or did I get the promotion? It becomes, did I act in accordance with my values? Did I choose courage over comfort? Did I respond with integrity even when it was hard? When this is your metric, the opinions of others become irrelevant data. Praise might be pleasant, but it doesn't add to your score. Criticism might be unpleasant, but it cannot subtract from it unless it highlights a genuine misalignment with your own virtues. Consider a practical example. You work tirelessly on a project, pouring your best effort into it, guided by your values of diligence and creativity. You present it to your team, and a colleague immediately dismisses it as a waste of time. The old, external standard version of you would be devastated. Your sense of worth, tied to their approval, would crumble, but the internal standard version of you performs a quick and powerful audit. You ask, did I act with diligence? Yes. Did I act with creativity? Yes. Did I intend to contribute value? Yes. Your internal scorecard is already complete and successful. Their dismissal is now simply a statement of their personal preference, a piece of information that you can evaluate objectively. It might contain a useful kernel of feedback you can use, or it might simply be noise. But it does not and cannot alter the fundamental fact of your own virtuous effort. You can acknowledge their comment without letting it define your reality, because your reality is now built on the solid ground of your own choices, a ground that no one else can ever walk on or damage. This is the ultimate liberation from taking things personally, because you have become the sole and final judge of your own character. And this brings us to what is perhaps the ultimate test of Stoic principles in action, moving beyond internal reflection to external engagement. This is the discipline of action, a practice that challenges us to meet insults and injuries not with the reflexive heat of retaliation, but with the composed, deliberate warmth of kindness and virtue. It's one thing to internally manage your feelings about a rude comment using the dichotomy of control or objective judgment. It is an entirely different level of mastery to consciously choose a response that actively embodies your values in the face of provocation. The Stoics weren't advocating for passive submission. This is not about letting people walk all over you. It is about recognizing that your greatest power lies not in fighting fire with fire, but in disarming the entire conflict with a surprising and virtuous response that redefines the terms of the engagement. Think of a common physical altercation. If someone shoves you, your instinct is to shove back harder. This immediately escalates the situation, locking both of you into a cycle of action and reaction where the only possible outcomes are someone getting hurt or someone backing down in defeat. Now imagine instead that when shoved, you simply take a small step back to steady yourself, look the person in the eye and ask with genuine calm, "Are you all right?" You seem really upset. This response is utterly disarming. It refuses to play by the rules of the game they initiated. It transmutes a physical confrontation into an opportunity for human connection. The discipline of action applies this same principle to verbal and social shoves. When someone hurls an insult, they are initiating a game of emotional ping-pong, expecting you to return the serve with equal or greater force. Responding with kindness or simple curiosity is like catching the ball, examining it, and gently placing it on the table. The game cannot continue because you have changed the game itself. We have powerful historical examples of Stoics doing exactly this. The most famous might be the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius facing a direct public insult. The story goes that a notorious heckler once followed him through the streets, hurling abuse and insults, trying to provoke a reaction from the most powerful man in the world. The emperor didn't ignore the man. He didn't have his guards seize him. Instead, he stopped, turned to the man, and responded with a stunningly simple and kind offer. He said, in essence, "You know you are correct. I am far from perfect. I make many mistakes. In fact, I need constant reminding of my duties and my flaws." So please continue. Your criticism is a service to me and to the state. By reframing the vicious insult as a useful public service, Marcus Aurelius completely drained it of its intended poison. He demonstrated that his self-worth was so secure, so anchored in his own internal standards, that he could genuinely welcome criticism, even when delivered with malice, and sift it for any potential grain of useful truth. His response was an act of supreme strength, not weakness. Another profound example comes from the life of Cotto the Younger, whom we mentioned earlier for his mastery of silence. On another occasion, an opponent named Publius Lentulus, fueled by hatred, actually spat in Cotto's face during a heated political debate. In the ancient world, this was one of the ultimate acts of contempt and deliberate provocation, a gesture designed to force a violent response. The entire Senate fell silent, waiting for Cotto's explosion, but Cotto, a staunch Stoic, simply wiped his face and replied with devastating calm, "I will swear to anyone, Lentulus, that people are wrong to say that you cannot use your mouth." With this witty, virtuous retort, Cotto did several things at once. He acknowledged the action without being controlled by it. He demonstrated his own self-possession. And he even offered a subtle, clever criticism of his opponent's general lack of eloquence, all without descending into the rage that Lentulus hoped to provoke. He turned a moment meant to humiliate him into a moment that revealed his own immense character and his opponent's pettiness. So how can we possibly hope to emulate such composed figures in our daily lives? It begins with a preparatory shift in intention. You must decide ahead of time that your goal in any social interaction is not to win, not to be seen as right, and not to defend your honor, but to act virtuously. Your success metric is your own conduct, not the other person's reaction. When an insult comes, your first internal move is the same pause we've practiced before. But in that space, instead of planning your counterattack, you ask a different question. What would a wise and kind person do here? This simple query accesses a different part of your brain, one focused on connection rather than conflict. Your response doesn't have to be a profound philosophical statement. It can be as simple as responding to a harsh email with, "Thank you for sharing your strong feelings on this. I'd like to understand your perspective better. Could we schedule a quick call to talk it through?" This response is kind, it is virtuous in its pursuit of understanding, and it is incredibly powerful because it completely bypasses the expected war of words. In a face-to-face situation, you might respond to a cutting remark with a genuine, non-sarcastic question. "It sounds like you're really frustrated by this. What part is most concerning to you?" This approach does something miraculous. It validates their emotion, which is not the same as agreeing with their insult, and seeks to understand the root of the problem. Very often, you will find that the person's anger was a mask for feeling unheard or afraid. Your virtuous response gives them a chance to take off that mask, transforming a potential conflict into a collaborative conversation. Each time you choose this path, you are not just avoiding a fight. You are actively building a world with less conflict, one virtuous action at a time, and proving to yourself that your peace is truly unassailable. Imagine being able to meet a harsh comment not with defensiveness, but with a genuine, light-hearted chuckle that completely neutralizes its power. This is the essence of our 24th technique, a powerful tool recommended by the great Stoic thinker Seneca, using humor as a shield. Seneca observed that many of the things that wound us are, when viewed from a slightly different angle, actually quite ridiculous. He wasn't advocating for becoming a court jester or making light of serious trauma. Instead, he pointed to a more subtle and profound skill, the ability to reveal the inherent absurdity in most minor social friction, thereby draining it of its emotional charge before it can ever penetrate your inner peace. This practice is less about telling jokes and more about cultivating a certain playful perspective, a mental flexibility that allows you to reframe an attack as a farce, transforming what could have been a painful moment into an opportunity for shared laughter or, at the very least, a private smile. Think about why criticism and insults hurt us. They often land because we accept the other person's premise that their opinion is a serious and weighty verdict on our worth. We treat their words like a formal legal document that we must plead against. Humor, in the Stoic sense, allows you to reclassify that document. It's not a legal indictment, it's a poorly drawn cartoon. It might be amusing, it might be strange, but it certainly isn't binding. When someone makes a snide remark about your outfit, instead of feeling judged, you might playfully agree, "I know, right? I'm trying to start a new trend. I call it deliberate mismatch chic." This does not mean you actually believe their criticism. It means you have chosen to engage with it on your own terms, treating it as a triviality rather than a truth. You have effectively declined their invitation to a duel of egos and instead invited them to a more lighthearted and far less stressful interaction. Developing this playful yet grounded attitude is a skill that can be cultivated. It begins with the foundational Stoic practices we've already discussed, particularly the view from above and objective judgment. Once you have objectively identified that a comment is just a sound wave with no inherent power, and once you have the cosmic perspective that this moment is a tiny blip in a vast universe, creating space for humor becomes much easier. From that vantage point, the spectacle of one human being getting genuinely upset about another human's choice of necktie or project management style is, frankly, a little funny. The practice is to gently access that perspective in the moment. It's about learning to spot the inherent comedy in the human condition, our endless capacity to take ourselves far too seriously. Start small and in private. When you find yourself replaying a slightly rude comment later that day, try reframing it in the most absurd way possible. If your neighbor made a passive-aggressive comment about your lawn, picture them as a royal inspector of grass, dressed in absurdly formal attire, meticulously measuring each blade with a tiny ruler. The goal isn't to fuel resentment, but to dissolve the event's seriousness through ridiculousness. This mental exercise builds the neural pathways you'll need to eventually access this response in real time. The key is to ensure the humor is directed at the situation's absurdity, never as a malicious counterattack aimed at wounding the other person. The Stoic use of humor is a shield for defense, not a sword for offense. It protects your peace without compromising your virtue. By choosing to meet life's inevitable petty annoyances with a light heart, you demonstrate a profound strength. The strength of someone who is so secure in their own value that they no longer need to defend it against every passing comment, and can instead enjoy the often comical theater of human interaction. And this brings us to our final and perhaps most vital technique, one that binds all the others together into a sustainable way of life. This is the practice of continuous practice and patience. It's essential to understand that everything we've explored, the dichotomy of control, the inner citadel, amor fati, is not a one-time inoculation against life's challenges. Stoicism is not a set of pills you take to be cured. It is a form of mental fitness, a daily discipline for the soul. You would not expect to do one set of push-ups and have a strong body for life. In the same way, you cannot simply understand these concepts intellectually and expect to be forever immune to taking things personally. The goal is not perfection, where you never feel the initial sting of an insult. The goal is progress, where you consistently get better at how you choose to respond to that sting. This is a lifelong journey of building resilience, not a destination where you arrive and declare yourself finished. Think of it like learning a new language. On your first day, you struggle with basic greetings. You make mistakes, you mispronounce words, and conversations are exhausting. But with daily, consistent practice, those awkward phrases become smoother. You don't berate yourself for not being fluent immediately. You understand that fluency is the result of thousands of small, often clumsy, attempts. Your practice of Stoicism is the same. There will be days when you master the situation, responding to criticism with serene curiosity. and there will be days when you completely forget your training, react defensively, and spend the evening replaying the interaction with regret. The crucial shift in mindset is to see that both of these days are essential to your training. The day you succeed proves the techniques work. The day you fail is not a failure at all. It is the most important training session of all because it shows you exactly where your understanding is still weak and where you need to focus your efforts next. Each perceived setback is simply the weights in your gym making you stronger for the next challenge. So how do we cultivate this patient, persistent mindset? The first step is to completely release the expectation of immediate mastery. Give yourself permission to be a beginner. When you feel the old, familiar heat of taking something personally rise up and you react in the old way, gently acknowledge it without self-condemnation. Instead of thinking, "I'm terrible at this, I'll never get it," try a more compassionate and accurate reframe. "Interesting, I felt threatened and I got defensive." That's a data point. Next time, I will try to insert a longer pause between the feeling and my reaction. This shifts your identity from a failed Stoic to a practicing Stoic, a student who is actively engaged in their own education. You are collecting data on your own patterns, which is the first step to changing them. The second step is to integrate micro-practices into the fabric of your daily life. You don't need to set aside hours for meditation. Stoicism is meant to be practiced in the marketplace, in the midst of your ordinary interactions. While you're in line for coffee, practice the view from above for just 10 seconds. During a boring work meeting, practice objective judgment on the presenter's comments. When you read a stressful email, take that one deep breath before replying, enacting the art of silence. These tiny, consistent repetitions are like depositing coins into your resilience bank account. One coin alone seems insignificant, but over months and years, the compound interest creates immense wealth of character. The goal is not to be stoic for an hour each morning, but to allow Stoicism to become the default operating system for your mind, running quietly in the background of every moment. Finally, embrace the idea of the lifelong journey itself. This isn't a race with a finish line. There is no certificate of completion for mastering your emotions. The world will never run out of potential irritations and challenges. That is its nature. Therefore, your practice must also be endless, but this is not a burden, it is the source of its power. It means that every single day offers you a new opportunity to practice courage, to exercise wisdom, and to choose virtue. Every interaction is your training ground. The person who cuts you off in traffic is your mindfulness coach. The critical colleague is your patience instructor. The thoughtless comment from a friend is your exam in forgiveness. By viewing your entire life through this lens of continuous practice, you transform it from a series of problems to be solved into a curriculum to be embraced. You begin to walk through the world with a quiet, steady patience with others, but most importantly with yourself, knowing that each step, whether seemingly forward or backward, is an essential part of the long and rewarding journey toward true emotional freedom. We have journeyed through 25 powerful Stoic techniques, from the foundational dichotomy of control to the transformative practice of continuous patience. We've explored how to see the world from a cosmic perspective, how to build an inner citadel of character, and how to meet insults not with retaliation but with virtuous action. But if there is one central thread weaving through every single method, it is this profound and liberating truth. Stoicism is not, and has never been, about suppressing your emotions or becoming a cold, unfeeling statue. The goal is not to never feel the sting. The goal is to master your response to it. It is about creating a space, however small at first, between that initial flash of hurt and your reaction. A space where your reason, your values, and your choice can live. This is the ultimate form of empowerment, deciding that your peace is not for sale and that your worth is not up for debate in the court of public opinion. This is not a philosophy to be simply understood, it is a practice to be lived. Knowledge without action is like a tool you never take out of the box. It might be valuable, but it does no work. So now, the most important step is yours. Your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to make this wisdom real. Don't try to implement all 25 techniques at once. That would be like trying to lift every weight in the gym on your first day. You will only overwhelm yourself. Instead, I want you to choose just one. Just one technique to practice with intention for the next 7 days. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control, pausing throughout your day to ask, is this within my control? Perhaps it's practicing objective judgment the next time a comment stings, consciously stripping away the story to find the neutral facts. Maybe it's the simple but profound art of silence, giving yourself the gift of a pause before you respond. Pick the one that resonates most deeply with you right now. Then, I want you to become part of a community of practice. This isn't a journey you have to take alone. After you've spent a week with your chosen technique, come back and share your experience in the comments below. What did you try? What did you notice? What was difficult? What small victory did you have? Your insights could be the very thing that helps someone else on their path. And if you found this journey valuable, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. This channel is dedicated to turning ancient wisdom into modern, practical tools for everyday life, and there is so much more to explore together. Thank you for investing this time in your own growth. Remember, the obstacle is the way. Your challenges are not roadblocks, they are the very path to building a stronger, wiser, and more peaceful